like to call this meeting of the Lammerville Unified School District Facilities Committee to order at 6:32. Roll call, please.
David Pombo.
Here.
Colin Clements.
Here.
Alvina Kaiser. Here. Jimmy LeGrand.
Here.
Erica Smith-Payne.
Here.
And Lisa
Boulay.
Boulay, here.
Receiving of public comments, I see none, so we will proceed to the presentation, District Facilities Needs and Challenges by Dr. Kirk Nicholas, District Superintendent.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. It's my pleasure tonight, along with my partner Rita, who will be switching the slides, to present an update on our facilities needs and also talk about some challenges in the 2017 version of the ongoing saga of how are we going to build schools in the 21st century. So go ahead. So before we get going, in particular for Lisa and Erica, who hasn't heard these terms before, we're going to go over a little vocabulary, but I promise not to go too deep into them, but they are important terms. So Mello-Roos taxes, CFD or Community Finance District, state matching funds, developer fees, shortfall funding, mitigation agreements, community master plan, and Exhibit B are all balls that are in the air in the juggling act that we do when we need to fund our schools. Go ahead. So a Mello-Roos tax at its very core is how government entities, cities and counties, school districts, that's a means for them to be able to finance major projects. And it is the mechanism in which our K-8 schools in this district are funded. In some ways, in our district, there are additional ways we can use funds from a Mello-Roos tax. Depends on how we set it up. And the entities that set up the ability to raise Mello-Roos taxes, I'll talk about in a second. But often people use a Mello-Roos tax and a special tax synonymously. Community Finance District is the mechanism in which Mello-Roos taxes go in and out in the funding process. We currently have 3 existing CFDs. The original CFD in 2002, which funded the buildings of Wickland, Bethany, and Altamont. And then 2007-1, which built Cuesta. And now we have a current existing one, a new one from June of 2014, which was going to fund Hanson, and can be annexed into, our neighborhood D can be annexed into it. And we are in the process of annexing it. What that does is locks in the rate so there aren't any changes to how things are set up and run. State matching funds, very important. In the mitigation agreements and the agreements that run the district, you have the plan for K-8 funding is Mello-Roos taxes and state matching funds. Since 2006, there hasn't been a state bond to fund schools, and so the passage of Prop 51 in last November was huge for a lot of people. Prop 51 is a $9 billion K-14 state construction fund to support modernization for older districts and building new schools such as in our district. It is a lengthy process to get onto the list of the state to get matching funds, and it is also a competition in the sense of you got to get there first. Developer fees. Developer fees, we've been spending a lot of time trying to communicate and educate the community. It is a loan. I don't know why they don't call it a developer loan, but that's what it is. It's a long-term, low-interest loan, and developers do that in certain instances where they front the money, and over the long-term build-out of a project, get paid back with interest. In our agreement, it was tied in 1998 to what is a index called Marshall-Swift. So here's how that works. When the high school was originally built, the Phase 1 and Phase 2, developer fees paid for $52 million of it. If you were to take 250 Mountain House lots that would be sold a year, $5,900 of that would go for each of the lots. So if you take 5,900 times 250 lots and stretch it out over time to pay off $52 million. It would take 32 to 35 years, depending on certain factors, at 2.2% interest. So the long-term loan in our reality is it will be paid off, we believe, in 32 years. And we've presently, since we began paying it off, $7.6 million has already gone back to the developer. Shortfall funding. Now, this one is easy to say and hard to explain, but in certain circumstances, based on the agreements, if all of the funding mechanisms that are available have been attempted to be used and you're short money, then there is written into the agreements the ability to go through a process and claim shortfall. And that shortfall would then put onto the developer the need to write a check for developer fees to fund the shortfall. They too would get paid that back with interest. But this is what's important. It's in bold and underlined at the bottom. This is not a sure thing. And in every conversation you have, when it gets into a serious conversation about shortfall, the definitions of words change. People interpret different parts of the agreement different ways. So even if we were to go through the process, there's no guarantee that a shortfall claim would actually be funded. So it's nice to think about, but in reality, if that is a trigger, it's a big fight to see if that's going to work out. Next slide. Okay, the mitigation agreements are basically the rules for how developers who are developing a community mitigate what they're doing and their impact on a community. So there are two original mitigation agreements, both from 1998, one with Trimark, the original master developer, and one with Tracy Unified. Presently, CalPERS representatives, Mountain House developers, are now the master developer and in charge of executing the master plan. But along with that original mitigation agreement with Trimark, there is a second and a third amendment. So it is changeable, but that also comes with a long process. Next slide. All right, the Community Master Plan was adopted in 1994. It lays out the whole vision for the community. Depending on the conversation and the breadth and width of it, the master plan is very tightly held document that's been approved and needs to roll out. There are some abilities to change things, but requires all factors and players that are involved to be able to do that, and then the county has to approve it, and it goes through a formal process that way. It's important for the sake of this conversation to understand that the master plan plays a significant role in the challenges that we face building schools for the next 10 years. Exhibit B is the last of the vocabulary terms. Back in the 1990s, they identified a facilities guide for student population driven, when we build new schools, and other things that the developers would apply or pay for to help the school district develop. That's called Exhibit B. This is the centerpiece of much of the consternation we face as a district, simply because it has not kept up with the pace of time. If you amortize it from 1998 till now, it doesn't keep up with the cost of times. And so it is really the cornerstone of lots of the frustrations that we feel in trying to take care of what the master plan asks us to do without a mechanism to fund things at the level the master plan has asked. So with that, I'm going to go into the meat of my presentation, but I'm going to say all these things at least once tonight, so I thought I'd throw it out there, say this is kind of what it is. So, all right, so this is the community, the master plan and the funding mechanisms in play. So back in 1896, the district was founded and nobody had heard of any of these terms, and I'm sure it was a lovely school. I understand it's a historical monument in Tracy now in a park. So we have that.
It was a very nice school, by the way.
It was, and I understand it's on every
He was one of
logo that
the
we have.
inaugural class members.
But when I presented that information a while ago, Rutherford B. Hayes was the president. So there you go. So in 04, 07, 2010, 2014, we started this massive growth of what is now known as Mountain House. And so what I have here in this slide is essentially the year the school opened, the CFD it's attached to, and how it was funded. So you have Wickland starting off with developer fees because nothing was here. and then it rolled into the process of a CFD and state matching funds all the way through until you get to Mountain House High School. And that changed because in the mitigation agreement, that was the mechanism of Mello-Roos and state matching funds weren't the process. So developer fees, a mitigation agreement with Tracy Unified, and state matching funds paid for the phase 1 and phase 2, and I'll talk about that in a little greater detail later in the presentation. The phase 3 is being paid for because of the generosity of our community and Measure L. We have some state matching funds that we can apply to that, which I'll explain later, but those are not the normal process. This is money the state owes us that Prop 51 will fund when they figure out how they're going to figure out how to give us the money. So I'll appreciate that journey as we go through it. And then finally, with Hanson, you have a CFD 2014, state matching funds, and Measure L because of the escalating price of building a school and trying to keep up with what the master plan asks us to do. All right, so we couldn't fit the map of Mountain House on here, so we've got it broken in two. So if you take a look, starting with the lower right-hand corner on the left-hand slide, you'll see the letter F. F is Wickland, E is Bethany, G is Altamont, H is Cuesta. Then we call it north of Byron Highway. You have a K and an L and a J and an I. Originally in the master plan, the I and the J were intended to be age-restricted, downsizing, the kids have grown up, moving on to a smaller house and a nice place, living. And K and L were intended to be normal villages like all the H, G, E, and F. At present, in discussions, as we're being informed that a reconsideration of neighborhood J is occurring, and it's possible that it could be split in two and have half of that community be tied to your normal family village concept and the other half to age restricted. So that would be a change to the master plan, but it also puts an impact on the school district in that if it's families living in half of J, they're going to have babies. Babies go to school. The two schools they could go to is K and L. So that is not in an approved state, but I can tell you that coming down the pike, the intention originally was to have two schools over there, and there's no way that if J were to be split in half, we would be able to build a school there. So those kids would either go to K or L or a combination thereof. If you look to the map on the right, that's the southern portion. That's in play as we speak. So again, the E and the F is Bethany and Wickland. The C is where the site where Hanson would be. The large rectangle with no letter in it that's turquoise or light baby blue is the high school, and the site of what would be a school in neighborhood D is there's the site. But then if you notice, there's a whole portion in white, and it starts to the right of the D and it goes all the way down to what would be the 205. So there's a whole story attached to that as well that I'll explain later. But one of our complicators is that white section, another complicated is the D section, and a complication is the K and L section. All right, this is the rendering of Hanson, and this is what it's going to look like when it's built. It's called Modern Prairie. Okay, so the challenges that we have with Hanson is we intend to break ground in April, maybe May. There are some bureaucratic things that are out of our control, but that's our goal. We need to open the school by August of 2018, and it takes 15 to 18 months to build a school. We are currently running out of room in our other schools, and Alvina and Noel have done an analysis of exactly when we hit our tipping point, and we're not there yet, but sometime next year we will hit our tipping point, there's no doubt. And more than likely, the reality will be that we will have to overflow kids out to Lammersville or consider another option. But we are not there yet. But every day, I mean, we do 2 times a month, every other board meeting, we do an enrollment report, and we're growing by about 12, 15, 18 kids a month, most of whom go to K-8s. So it's real. It's a real challenge. Prop 51, it passed. We're very excited, and remembering the history of that, the governor did not support the bond. He did not interfere or run anything against it, so it passed. What he's done now is he's going to support it and let the will of the people be heard. However, he has put new expectations from his administration to two entities, the State Allocation Board and to the Office of Public School, OPSC. Construction, thank you. And they're having to review their policies and procedures and come up with an auditing process. What does that mean to us? It's slowing down money they already owe us, and it's slowing down the ability to apply to get the Hansen match. That is a major short-term frustration and impingement on our ability to pool the money in the immediate. So we have to be creative. Selling bonds for Mello-Roos, that's not a slam dunk deal. The way it works is bond investors are gambling on making money off of a community where they buy the bonds to make money off of the investment, and then we get the money up front to build our schools. Right now, Hansen is about 55% developed. The rest is undeveloped. D is completely undeveloped. So there's a concern that if we go out and try to sell the bonds to get as much money as possible early, we're actually going to cost ourselves money in the long run. So there's a cost-benefit analysis that's presently going on to try to determine what's the best way to get as much money out of the bond sale or bond sales to raise the Mello-Roos monies to build Hansen Elementary. And if you see there the term absorption study, we have a person that's doing an analysis of how much we can sell as developed property as we speak. We should have that information sometime early next month, which will be a huge deciding and determining factor of my recommendations to the board for how we're going to go forward on the Hansen build. And then Measure L has a long resolution list of projects. The high school was the #1 priority. However, it was intended to subsidize the Hansen project and not to substantially fund it. And so though all the money could be applied, the intention of the district is not to have to do that. We're going to figure out in this maze of puzzles how we're going to figure out how to fund it. Next slide. All right, so the effectiveness of the mitigation agreement today. So we've said this for many years, but in 1998 was a long time ago. And here's where we're at. So neighborhood D is presently, if it ever dries out, they want to get going on it. So we know that we have two major developers there, CalPERS, who's represented in the local community by Mountain House Developers, and by IHP, who advise CalPERS on their decisions. Jerry Camilos is a developer. He helped, his land, we'll talk about in a little bit, but I met with him last week, and he is actively pursuing building houses in the east side of D, and he wants to start to develop the underground structures in neighborhood A, which is south of Grant Line Road. So these guys are seeing people moving over here for a great school district and a great community and cool houses, and they're going to ride that wave. So they're wanting to build as fast as possible. Unfortunately, the 1998 agreement does not generate the kind of money we need to build that kind of schools that we've been building historically in the community. Now, there's options that you can use there. We can build a cheaper school. We can figure out a creative financing way to make it happen one more time. But in the end, the mitigation agreement can't keep up with itself. It's 2017. The world's a different place than it was. The people who put this together, it doesn't work anymore. I've said this is now the third time publicly. I've said it's collapsing on itself. So the thing that the board, this group needs to know, and the community, is we can't go forward and do another general obligation bond to try to build schools. Our intention was to finish the high school, have some money to do big projects over the next 10 or 15 years, and maybe be able to sprinkle some money towards Hansen. With all the histrionics that went on with trying to get that done through two different developers and all the things that came with it, there's really no way to do another GO bond without a major negotiation and rebuilding of all these agreements, other than one for modernization. So what the way we can access money is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So the other thing you need to know is that the bidding process it's a contractor's market right now. I'll tell you one quick story about the bidding process. We went out to bid for Mountain House High School, and the second most expensive thing beyond concrete was the wall stuff, so the drywall and all the stuff that they put on the walls. There was one bidder, and he came in high. So common sense would say, well, competition lowers the price. So we pushed it back out. 6 people bid. All the prices came in. That guy came in at the lowest. But what did he do? He raised his price. That's how expensive things are out there because everybody's busy. So it's putting a stress on what a dollar buys today will be less tomorrow. And so we're trying to get things done as fast as possible, but there's rules to follow. So the master plan has 2 specific plans in it, specific plan 2 and 3, that requires a review of student generation. And that's currently what we're doing right now, and looking at the full build out of the community and trying to figure out how all these mitigation agreements are going to work, and trying to find money and organize and all that. We have to review student generation. And in our discussions with CalPERS and their representatives, in particular IHP, we're being asked 2 questions, which is essentially, what does Mountain House look like 20 years from now? And what are these neighborhoods going to look like when the inhabitants age? So there's 2 things that happen. People have their kids, the kids grow up, they go through the school system, kids move out, mom and dad move, sell the house for a profit to a family with young kids who want to be in a great school district, in a great community, in a cool house. So that's the way the master plan was developed. But often what happens is, and it depends on the job cycles and the economy, is sometimes people raise their kids go out of the house, they move on, and they stay. If we built a $45 million K-8 school and we had a neighborhood that decided not to sell and bring in a new family, we would have too many schools. And if you really look into the nuts and bolts of these agreements, that's been a conversation put in there to make us review about whether or not we're going to need to have the 10 schools that the master plan says in theory. And so the specific plan 2 and 3 address this point, that there's supposed to be a review. Next slide. So I spent a lot of time thinking about the title of this one, so I'm going to read it. So how to deal with today's reality and yesterday's mitigation agreement. That's kind of our challenge really for the last year, and will be for the next few years as they're building lots of houses. So if you do a student generation rate, the other thing is if you think that you don't need an additional school, or you might not, then you have to look at the scale, scope, and size of the schools that you're going to have to build. And the pressure points on us from the developers is that they're not going to pay, they have no desire to pay a developer fee or a shortfall funding for a neighborhood that quantifiably can't prove that it's going to have 20 years from now the kind of kids to generate to fill up a school. And that's the friction point that's been around long before my tenure. And I understand Mr. Hanson, who already had gray hair, but he grew more gray hairs in his time, is that friction over quality of school building, mitigation agreement, and master plan, and developers and their role, which is to make money and not waste money. And so that conversation has been live for years in this district, and it continues to be live. It's a very, very challenging journey. So CalPERS is open to review the mitigation agreements and the master plan. They themselves are submitting a plan to change downtown. So all of these things are in play. So one of the things that if you look at it, it's like hidden right there in plain sight, but if you're desperately looking for money and ways to solve problems, you look at things from a different lens. And in specific plan 2 and 3, it makes it really clear what the solve is in neighborhood D, which is the one neighborhood is most concerned about not having enough land, because the high school takes up 46 acres, that will generate enough students to sustain itself over decades. So in table 5.1 of specific plan 2, and in section 5.2.2 in specific plan 3, it pretty clearly lays out what the developers were thinking back in 2005, which is that neighborhood D should be split in 2. And when I show you the map, you'll see how hidden in plain sight it is, because the white section is specific Plan 3 and the colorful section is specific Plan 2. And so the reality is the mitigation agreement will not fund enough money to build a school in D the way we build schools now. The challenge is, do we follow the out given in the specific Plan 2 and 3, which would be a path that would be the most fiscally prudent? That is a challenge and a question that will be coming forward, but it is a very serious question. You only get to spend that money once. So I can tell you that back in 2013 and earlier, the decision was made to build Hanson 2 stories if this scenario were to actually come to fruition. In that two buildings, 2 stories, leaves enough space to build a third building with 2 stories that could house the kids that are represented in Table 5.1 in specific Plan 2. So these are things that have been thought about and talked about, the reality of construction costs today, the reality of how things are playing out in 2017. That's a very real conversation that needs to be had. So with that said, the only thing I could say also is that it may be because we have the money identified, but we can't get access to it, that another possibility with Hanson is to break ground and build it in phases like we built the high school. Get the multi-use room, admin, and first classroom wing built, and then possibly build the second classroom and maybe a third wing in a year or 2 after we get rolling. None of these are great answers, but they reflect the reality of California financing, the mitigation agreement, the master plan, and the community. Next slide. All right, so I'm going to go back to this map. So if you look to the one on the right, and you see it looks like somebody putting the number 1 up. If you look at the bottom, that whole section is in white, and then there's a little finger that goes up to the right of D. Do you all see that? Okay, that's specific Plan 3. If you see neighborhood D with all the varying colors, that's specific Plan 2. So this was created a long, long time ago, but this reflects a couple of major decisions that are coming down the pike. First, C or D, or to split D, is represented in that middle section. The kids in the white section of D would end up going down to school in the big white section there with the 2 yellow markers that look like dog ears. Those are the identified sites for the school, and those are neighborhoods A and B. Now, the challenge is in the dog ears, is those schools, according to the master plan, are supposed to house 450 kids. Anyone will tell you a small school of 450 kids is not sustainable because they're cost prohibitive. So in the master plan, it does say that we can build 1 school in lieu of 2 schools. But the complicator there is we have 32 acres of land and a bunch of electric lines that run right through the middle of it, because you give away the cheapest land, right? And that's the way the world works. So we're right now considering whether or not the dog ears come into play, or to build 1 school there, and whether or not that will house or not house the kids on the east side of D. But I would predict that after Hanson's built, the next school that we would build will be the school in A/B. Now, if you look to the left, I have no idea what's going to happen in K and L, but I can say that it's been about a year now, and they've been very consistent about reconfiguring that too. So everything that was in the master plan is in a state of flux right now because of all of the variables that I've just laid out to you. Next slide. All right, so to the fun part. So there's the early rendering of Mountain House High School Phase 1 and Phase 2. You're going to hit these quick. Okay, we've already completed the admin building, multi-use room, gym, sports field, stadium, classroom wing, and those were funded by developer fees, tracing mitigation agreement, and state matching funds. What's currently being built and will be funded through Measure L and state matching funds of money the state already owes us, not additional and new state matching funds, are theater, library, aquatic center, CTE building, and tennis courts. And this is about a week and a half ago. That's the actual the seating that goes down by the stage in the theater. Next slide. That's a pretty rendering of it. Next slide. That's the library, or part of the library, and that's a rendering.
And by library, you mean Learning Commons?
It's Learning Commons, sir. Yes, thank you for that clarification. There is
So
our,
does that mean we will have a learning commonsarian?
yes,
Okay.
and Panama hats are a must. That's a picture of the pool, aquatic center, water polo housing area, and the pool house that goes with it. Next slide. That's the back side of the CTE building, and the original rendering we were sharing. And those are beautiful tennis courts that was a day, obviously, before this latest storm, but we're about ready to take that over. So Measure L dollars are going to what we said they would. We're very proud of the progress. It's an unbelievable amount of rain days these guys have had to face. So I'm guessing that our timelines might be a little off because of the weather, but it is a unique year. So this is my final slide. So we are finishing all the documentation to get on the list for state matching funds for Hanson, and we're really down to the last couple. We are working with all of our consultants who advise us on all these factors, and we are actively pursuing every penny that we could possibly get our hand on. So we have the money the state already owes us. That's the state, we call the Altamont match. We have the Hanson work that will get on the list that Prop 51 will pay for over time. We're being told late 2018, early 2019. We're being told for the Altamont match about sometime during 2017, but the governor already has thrown a curveball. So now it's not early, it's mid. So we'll see how that goes. Land sale is a paperwork effort with developers and the district where we can change the way the land is given from or taken over by the district, and to do the paperwork where it gives us more matching funds from the state. And then we actually went and have challenged with the new buildings at Mountain House High School that they should be given us credit for more classrooms. And we're hoping that the leaders, the deciders at the CDE will decide, yes, in fact, you have 3 or 4 more classrooms, and that will generate more funds. So we have maximized every effort. And then we are currently identifying the contractor. We're going through the process. I think we'll be, by the end of this month, we'll be recommending to the board the contractor who will build Hanson. And then finally, and I'll just read this because I think this is really representative of where we're at. We are working with CalPERS representatives to address today's challenges and solve tomorrow's school funding needs, because all of these variables are very real. What I've learned about lawyers who work with contract language in these type of agreements is every word has a different meaning depending on what group you represent. So there's no clear-cut answer to a lot of this, and it just comes down to rolling up your shirt sleeves, sitting in a room, being stubborn on one side, giving a little bit on the other side, and keeping your eye on the prize. So if that is my presentation, update on our facilities needs, and happy to answer any questions.
For the members of the committee that are a little bit new to this, can you speak to what happens when they approve a change in the map? I'm going to call it a map, like in JK. And so if they go from age restricted, which has no kids, to open, which would have kids and therefore student population, what avenues does the district have to sort of get additional funding because they're creating new student generation that wasn't anticipated in the previous agreements?
So that would shift into anything that they're in a student generating environment. They're going to have to, those units, those EDUs, I believe they're called, right? Apply towards generating a potential Mello-Roos. They'd have to be attached to a CFD. So if they change J and half of it becomes a regular village, then we'll have to go through the same process that we went through with Hanson in 2014 and we're going through in D. But they don't get to do that because they want to do that. They have to go all the way through an approval process with the county. I went and met with the county, the lead, Carrie Sullivan, and said, okay, so what is this process of changing what seems to me sometimes the Ten Commandments, the second incarnation of the Ten Commandments on stone, which is the master plan? And she said, well, there's a process, and she showed me it. And it's a simple form to fill out, but a very complicated process. So that's the two sides of it.
But the point that I'm getting to is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in the initial plan, there was a mitigation agreement that the district had veto, like the district, it could not be forced down the district's throat. That
Correct.
we're going to build a bunch of houses in your district. We are not going to give you any money, and you're just going to have to deal with it. We would have said, no, I'm sorry. We had essentially veto power if we
Correct.
didn't like the mitigation agreement. However, now that we have the map that we have, if the county, which has authority over that map, approves moving from age restricted to non-age restricted, we get the additional dollars of Mello-Roos, but we do not have veto authority over that map change.
That is correct. The only veto authority we have, and it's really important, is if there gets to be a stress point with student population, the only real hammer we have is we can go through a process to stop builders from pulling permits. Now remember that the developer has contracts with builders to sell houses. So if we block that, that's an attention getter. So there's about 3 different layers to it. A change in the map can happen, goes through the county. It can be blocked by the county. Or if we get put under difficult circumstances and can't figure out how to house the students that they would generate, then we have the ability to stop permits. So that's the constant conversation.
And is our ability to stop permits, is it community by community, or is it holistic for basic, so if it looks like we have appropriate
It would
facilities.
be community-wide. We'd shut it all down, if that's what you're
Is it
asking.
all, I'm wanting you to clarify, is it all or nothing?
It would be all, as far as I understand. So if we can't house the students, then we would shut it all down.
Okay. So the reason why I'm saying that is it's not like if they flip from age restricted to non-age restricted and we look at what we would do in that community to build a facility and say, oh, you know what? We really can't afford to build a school there without help. So if you flip it to non-age restricted, we will block your permits. We can't, that's not an avenue for us as a district. We either block permits for everything, including, the rest of the villages, or we allow it. The time to deal with all this was really in the original mitigation agreement.
Right.
So I'm trying to give the rest of the committee a little bit of of insight into the complexities. There is no easy solution to what we are facing. There is no silver bullet or magic banana. It's a lot of challenge.
And the other thing is the more you get into it, the mitigation agreements are brilliantly written in favor of the developer. And that doesn't make them bad. I've said this every time. They're good people. They show up to work. They are committed to their deal. But they see the world differently than the way a school district sees the world. Their job is to generate profit. And so they have to see the world through that lens. Our desire is to build the greatest school district in the history of the world and help kids and help make a community proud. And so often those two things aren't in conflict, but where it is in conflict is when you're trying to identify how do we build these state-of-the-art schools when the funding mechanism given to us doesn't generate the money. And even when we went out to the community and raised the money through the community choosing to pay a higher tax on itself, we got slammed for that. So they have I don't want to be pejorative, but they just see the world from a different perspective. The only hammer, and I've talked with the person who oversaw the development of that master plan how do you want to describe that experience? In a meeting of the minds, he's very clear. If you're not getting what you need, shut it down. People who work for kids don't think like that. So we try to work it all out, and so far, this and past boards, this and past superintendents have figured out a maze to get things, keep it moving forward. But you're right, there is no simple answer. It is a ridiculously complicated puzzle to solve, And every school has its own story. That's what I kind of like about like the comedy routine when I'm telling my friends about how this works is every one of these schools has a battle, a story, a fight, a victory, and in the end the school gets built. But there's some blood, sweat, and tears that are fought and done behind the scenes that make it most days fun and challenging and some days not so much.
You made a comment that, the opposing forces is we're trying to build, state-of-the-art facilities or world-class, I forget what you said, but
The greatest school district in the history of the world.
greatest school district in the history of the world, right? I have to respond to that because it makes it sound like, and this is one of the comments that some people in the community make, and it's probably because of comments like that, the district has overspent on facilities, and that's what's created the funding shortfall or the funding challenges, that we face today. And my response is, as a developer, I understand it when Trimark and Shea say we overspent on facilities because they're defining overspent as spent more than the mitigation agreement and all of its amendments and annexes and tables and everything allows. My response to that, however, is that if I agree to pay for a meal in 30 years, and we agree that it's going to be there's going to be chicken and potatoes and salad and a dessert, that's not an exorbitantly expensive meal. But then if I say, so it's that meal right now is $20 or $10, whatever you want to say, and we're going to inflate it at 1% or 1.5%. But the cost of living of that meal goes up to the tune of an average of 4.5%, then by the time you actually get to eat that meal, you have two choices. You can have top ramen, or you're going to spend more than I agreed to pay. And it's true. Looking at it from a developer's perspective, we spent more than the mitigation agreement allowed, but in order to spend the amount of money that the mitigation agreement allowed, we'd be looking at prefabs in all of these communities. I don't look at it as overspending. When you look at the high school, is it nice? Yes. Is it we don't have solid gold toilet seat covers. We didn't buy $1,000 screwdrivers,
And to add on to what you're saying is I've been hearing that from multiple developers, in particular with the ones that are responsible for the master plan. But I've just said, show me quantifiably that is true. And one of the representatives of the representatives went through an exercise and identified a school in Southern California and gave us a side-by-side comparison and said, see, there you go. You guys see that you could have done it for this and you're doing it for that. And then we started looking into it in greater detail, and they presented an apple and an orange instead of two oranges. So I had the great pleasure of being able to go through and explaining why an apple and an orange isn't quantifiable. Smaller school, started 2 years earlier, single story, larger land, or smaller land mass, all of these things. And when you did the math around it, there was not a huge delta between the cost of the two schools. So that has yet to be proven to me quantifiably, and until they do, I'm going to say poppycock.
And I believe it also bears mentioning that the developers, the builders, the house sellers out there have been promising caviar and champagne and giving us money to buy beer and crackers. And then on top of their promises, the design standards in Mountain House are such that you couldn't do beer and crackers if you wanted to.
Correct.
So it's
one of those catch-22s where you violate the master plan no matter what you do, and the mitigation agreement doesn't give you the money you need to do with what the master plan's telling you, and you're the responsible party for fixing the mess. And when you go and say, hey, you know what, this is a catch-22, good luck to you. So what you have is a solvable problem over time, and raw determination and stubbornness and keeping your eye on the prize is what's going to make it happen. But it was important to present to the facilities committee, these are the realities. We have 3 more schools to build, looks like, at most 4. We'll get Hanson going, and then we'll see how fast A and B go, because talking with Mr. Camilos, he wants to go fast. So it makes me scratch my head even more. And then by the time that gets going in a couple years, they'll be scraping ground over across the Byron Highway, and we'll be going, okay, here we go, last school, or we got, 2 more schools. I guess it's 4 more schools. I'm sorry, 4 more schools. Any other questions?
Yeah, I'd like to give an opportunity to the new committee member and also our only non-board member, non-district office member to ask any clarifying questions they might have.
I'm all set.
You have solutions?
Thank you. Yeah, I wish. Give me another week.
Some days I say to myself, I guess 16 years ago, I was an English teacher and a basketball coach, and I laugh at it. But it's really, as an English teacher, it's interesting because these words and the play with words and the way people use words, it's all very interesting. So we'll get her done, and it needed to be said.
I, on the other hand, have about 1,000 questions to ask you, but I'm going to wait till the rest of the board is here and you're sitting right down there to ask them.
Happy to do it.
Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nicholas.
Moving on to V5, not V, it's been a long day.
No.
Facilities use update, facilities use minutes.
Those are included in the packet. They are the minutes from the last facility use committee meeting that we had. In addition to the amendment 2 that I created based on that last meeting, separating the foundations, boosters, and PTA groups. So I kind of went through the facility use handbook, and where it seemed to pertain when we needed to separate the group are the pages that I affected. Then on C, the facility usage reports are enclosed, pages 9 through 15. And always the same peak of time usage when school is out, highest peak being around between 5 and 7. And then you can see, as usual, the multi-purpose rooms at the elementary sites are used the most frequent. And then Rita also included the tiers that use those particular facilities. I thought that was very helpful. Thank you, Rita.
That
And
is
of course,
great information.
I thought it was too. When
I
saw
never
them,
would
oh,
have
hey,
thought
these are
to
different.
ask, but that is, I'm sure that will be a topic of discussion.
And it's very interesting because at most of the sites, the tier 1 usage is the majority of the multi-use rooms, but not at all of them. At Altamont, there's less tier 1 than any of the other tiers.
Well, I will mention, we thought that there was a shortcut of placing school events with the civic permits calendar where they didn't have to answer all of those questions that an individual has to answer by going directly into the calendar. Well, when that happens, it doesn't appear on the reports when we run them. So we will have to have them change that so they reflect on these reports. So I'm glad you mentioned that because I wanted to let you know that we thought it was a shortcut, but in the long run, it didn't help us out providing us information we
So
needed.
these numbers will look different in the next report.
Exactly. Well, yeah, I guess when we can get him to change that. They may have already booked them out. Yeah. Because we try to encourage them to book all their events through the school year.
Yeah,
Excuse-
everything really should be reflected
You
in
can
the
see it
report
on
so
the
that we can.
calendar, but when you extract, it doesn't
doesn't
appear
come
in the
out.
numbers. And then, of course, we'll probably, once we do make the change for the Tier 1A and the civic permit software, we'll have a separate line item there. But once again, everyone has pretty much booked their events.
Well, as we've said many times, this is a work in progress and
Page 15 of 21, the high school. That was interesting to see. Look at all
Yeah.
the little boxes in there, nice and neat. Then D, pages 16 is the finance report. And it looks like I will have to address Lammersville, why there's a negative $80 in the multipurpose room,
Must be paying someone to use the room.
maybe. Although we had, it wasn't at Lammersville, we did have a Tier 1 schedule an event at a K-8 site that we secured a custodian to come and open the site, and then the organization, the club class did not show up. So of course, we're needing to pay the custodian the 2 hours, so that's obviously facility use. I will be addressing that tomorrow. Let's see. We only had one denied application due to lack of coverage for a Tier 3 organization, and that's listed on the agenda. don't know
I'm
that-
sorry, can we go back to the
Yes.
finances?
Yes, D.
I apologize that I don't know this. What is the difference between MPR and MPR/K?
Let's see. Kitchen.
Okay.
They had a kitchen included
Oh,
with it.
multipurpose room without kitchen and multipurpose room with kitchen.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We could probably spell it out there. There's enough
No.
space.
No, I'll never ask that again. Like, perfectly obvious now that you say it.
With the total revenue, the revenue to date is 138,982. Is that earmarked for maintenance and upkeep
Good
and
question.
things like
Yes, it
that?
is.
Okay.
Yes, it is. And normally when the request to use these funds, we usually bring it forward and bring it to the committee that we want to utilize the funds collected for that.
Okay, thank you.
Your negative $80, $81 comment caused me to look down at the 2016, 2017 expenses compared to revenues. And in general, revenues are significantly higher than expenses, as I would
Right.
expect. But the high school multipurpose room has revenue of 1,700, but expenses of 3,500. Is that because of tier one
Very likely.
organizations
I
and
would
we
have to
need a
break down
custodian?
exactly what was charged there, because I could run a report that tells me if it was payroll that hit that account. Very
And
likely that's
I
what
don't,
happened.
I don't want to ask you to do a research project. I think conceptually that makes sense because there's a lot of tier one activity in the high school
don't collect
multipurpose
revenue
room
for.
that we don't charge for, so that would make sense. I
Right.
don't think a research project is
Okay.
necessary.
That's
That-
what the problem, that's what it is.
Okay, thank you.
And we had, as I mentioned, one denied application, and then we did provide 2 reimbursements to organizations, one because of the rain, and the other was just the refund of their deposit.
What is Ndokwa?
It's the name of the association.
Okay,
There was some dance group.
Ah.
But they got approved for Questa.
Oh, they did, after all?
They got,
Okay, denied for Ultimate, approved for Questa. Well, that's good.
It's good to hear.
Now, is there any, because I know now we have, Lisa's new to the committee. I will have Rita send you the facility use handbook unless you're already familiar with it. We do have it available on the website.
okay.
What we normally do is if there are any changes that will happen, that we discuss here, take it to the board for approval, they're called amendments. And then in June, all of those amendments, and we don't have as many this year, because we had quite a few the last 2 years.
we restate it in its entirety, so we
Oh
don't
my
have
gosh, it was a
500 minutes.
lot of work. That they will be incorporated into a clean, fresh handbook.
Well, at this point, the handbook is mostly amendments.
It's mostly amendments now, so I think we should be proud of that.
It's a lot of work.
It was. Is there anything that you feel is necessary to include as part of the facility use handbook? I know this committee now has formed from a facility use to be facilities in general. Was there anything, additional agenda topics that you feel need to be added to this committee? I know Kirk Nicholas mentioned the mitigation agreement. That's very complicated.
Little light reading.
I think
Every time I pick it up, I
adding,
find something different.
I think modifying this from facilities use to just facilities and adding to our responsibilities, the initial recommendation, I guess, for solving that, I think that's enough.
Okay.
That's a big enough bite to chew.
And,
Yes.
and I think we just need to continue to add as a discussion item, and that the new facilities at the high school and how and if we will be allowing public use
Yeah,
of
which
the.
we've already been discussing as part of facility use.
Yes.
Okay. All right, now,
Moving on to item 6, information and discussion items, facilities use handbook, high school swimming pool, page 17 and 18.
so I know this was a big topic of discussion at the last meeting, and Ben Faubert provided us some information, and we discussed it at a previous board meeting. Sorry, I missed the last one. I don't know if it was revisited at the last board meeting.
Sure. I know there was do you remember if we discussed the pool at the last board meeting, or was it the
A
meeting
second time?
before
'Cause
that?
I
No,
know-
we just, Ben did a presentation.
It was 2 meetings ago when I was in attendance, but
The
the
last
last board meeting
meeting-
I missed. I don't think you guys revisited it again.
On the 15th, I don't think we've
No,
talked about it anymore.
Mr. Miller.
Oh,
is-
board meeting, not facilities committee. I'm sorry.
We
I'm
went
like, yes, we
facility-
did the last one. We did.
Facility use, we did.
We did
Then
not.
discussed
We
it at a
didn't
board
discuss
meeting,
it
but not the
again
second
last time.
So I know that as in our cabinet meeting, we've been discussing the role or the future of how the swimming pool would be used. And I asked Mr. Miller to be present today because he provided me a draft. This is strictly a draft. Mr. Faubert had provided one. The following day, approached Mr. Miller and said, can you take a look at this? Can you see what you can find out? He's our director of HR. So he crafted the draft that you see in here. I don't know if you want to speak to it. We had a minor discussion about where we would be going forward with this, with the CSD. Would this position be certificated or classified? We likely thought it would be a facility that could be rented through civic permits. Anything?
You're touching on all
I
of it.
thought so. I was trying to.
Good evening, everyone, officially. Yeah, so the job description that you see there is really more tailored towards a management position, somebody who would facilitate the use of the actual facility, and not so much tailored towards someone who would be working directly with students of the district in the capacity of teaching, physical education, or coaching. Now, while there are many aspects of that job description that would fit under that umbrella of working with students directly, it would just take some tweaks to some of the requirements that we would ask of the individual and some of the other things that we were doing. So what it really comes down to, and what the discussions have been in cabinet, are what's the long-term goal of the facility itself, and how do we want to, what can we do with it to make it the most successful, not only for the school district, but for the community, if that's something we're looking at, and then moving forward with that. So the description, as Alvina pointed out, is really just kind of a rough draft of things to consider as we move forward with this. We know that this is something that we'd like to put in place fairly quickly in respect to the pool being finished in the next few months, and then potentially the use of the facility over the summer, if that's something that we want to look at. But it really is coming down to how do we want to tie it all together. There's been some suggestions to go a couple of different ways where a job description would be wrapped around somebody who would be, say, a physical education teacher at the high school, working with students throughout the day, but also help facilitating the community use, maybe before and after school use, weekend use, and really just a manager of somebody who would come in and help facilitate conversations with the community itself. So a lot of different things to look at.
The way this is currently written, it would be a classified position rather than a certificated position, correct?
That's a great question, Mr. Pombo, and again, it would really depend upon what our long-term usage is. You could do it either way. You could do a classified position. However, if they're working with students, it would probably be a certificated position as a physical education teacher, so.
The reason I ask is because currently there are no certificated.
That's correct, yeah, exactly.
Certification
Very- yes,
requirements
exactly.
in it. And
You pointed it out.
Yeah.
I haven't spoken with Principal Faubert on this part of it, but what is he envisioning it at the position as at this point? More towards the certificated or more towards the classified?
I would venture to say it's more of a hybrid, where it's going to be an individual who's going to fit both positions quite well, where they're working with their students on a fairly frequent basis, but also facilitating and growing a program that's going to work with the community as well. So
That would seem to me the best option, because then you get more bang for your buck. You have somebody that can teach, even if it's not all day at the high school, but if they could teach 2 or 3 classes and then focus the remainder of the day on.
yeah, exactly.
parts
And
of
this
the-
really could be somebody, and when you really look out, this could be somebody where you're hiring a certificated individual who is maybe teaching some physical education classes during the day that pertain to water safety or whatever it might be, but also they could be your water polo coach or your swim coach at the high school as well. But then somebody who's also facilitating the usage of the facility through the intermediate of working with outside agencies that are from our community. So, youth groups, other community groups that may want to rent the facility, that person might just be the point person for the district in kind of keeping the calendar and managing the use of the pool itself. So there are multiple things to look at and kind of drill down on and have a better understanding.
For someone with the qualifications we're looking for, are those type of people common? I mean, I know we have a hard time finding qualified teachers, and it seems like this position has a lot of specialty areas and requires a lot of experience that is not, to me, doesn't seem like it would be common experience. Would we have a hard time finding someone to fill the position?
Well, potentially, yeah. So as Mr. Pombo pointed out, the way it's written right now is really for a classified individual, because it's lacking the certifications of being in a classroom setting. If you were to go strictly with this particular setup, it might be a little bit easier to find somebody that would meet some of the credentialing that's non-school related, so the CPR, the swim, those type of things. But then you're really restricting yourself to someone who's going to really just be managing the facility and getting groups in and running the calendars and maybe hiring lifeguards or, that type of thing. So it doesn't necessarily align to some of the things that we're doing at the high school or the district itself. So, yeah, those tweaks would have to be made. That hybrid position, that you're absolutely correct. It might be a little difficult to find that one person that would just be, I'm a college educated, credentialed in the state of California that happens to manage pools on the side, and I'm the person for you. So it might be a little difficult to find, but we'd certainly give it a shot if that's what we wanted to do. My thing has been in our cabinet meetings, and something to consider is, do we want to write a job description that dictates what we do, or do we want to put together a facility and offer something that's going to drive what we're looking for, to your question? And so that's really kind of the chicken or the egg at this point, where we're trying to figure that out.
Thank you.
I had the same
Eyebrows?
comments that you guys had, so
I think ideally what we really want to do is we want to get something that's going to be, it's going to reach the most individuals as possible. We don't want to limit ourselves, but we also understand it's a challenge to be able to touch everything at the same time, so.
Since this isn't an approved job description, obviously it's in draft form, and we have a recruitment fair coming up Saturday. How do we go about recruiting for something that hasn't actually been board approved?
Well, that's not really, that is a great question, yeah. So we'll take certain individuals, we'll walk them around the pool and say, hey,
Yeah.
what do you think?
Do you have any of these?
Yeah, so, no, just, I think it would be more along the lines for some of us that are privy to what we're looking for, to just have it in the back of our minds to think, hey, that might be somebody that,
And if we had to pick priorities, I mean, I just had a thought. Given that finding somebody who's, obviously, if you can find the person that's everything,
Yeah.
right, that's great. But if we had to pick a priority, my initial thought is getting the pool up and the program up and running, coordinating with the community services district and all of that. Somebody that we're comfortable can set it up is probably a more important objective than a certificated can teach swimming and all of that. So if we had to pick a more important priority, my sense is comfort that they can set up the program is probably more important.
Yeah, although I'm not sure that this position would be that impossible to fill, because there are water polo and swim coaches out there that are PE teachers at schools, and so they would have, maybe not every single thing just like we want, but the majority of the things that we would want in an individual.
not to mention that they're coming to a brand-new facility on a campus that is the envy of probably the state of California. Yeah, I'm sure there's some selling points there, but point well taken that wanting to have that program up and running is certainly important. But again, it's just, there's nothing to say that we can't open it one way and make adjustments as we go to meet the needs of the district as those needs come up, so. Excuse me.
Further questions or comments from the committee?
All right.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Miller.
Thank you.
I guess I should wake up and pay attention.
You're okay. It's good to read it.
Item 7, action items. Those should go quick. Oh, I did skip something. High school tennis court, I apologize.
So, Mr. Legrand stated that the tennis
They're
courts have been
available. They're used,
released
they started using them last week.
to the school. So I'm imagine that Rita and I will be bringing forward next month some rates. I know she's already been pulling some cost estimates for rentals of tennis courts, but that means adding as an option a facilities to use and civic permits once we determine those amounts. It's probably easier to release a tennis court without warranty issues.
Yeah.
Than it would be a building, so we'll bring that forward. I just kind of want to give an update, they're done. We'll get some additional cost estimates, and then we can bring it forward as an amendment.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Glad we got those tennis courts done.
They were bugging me on February 6th, so they had to wait a week. They got them on the 13th, so
Oh, before Valentine's Day.
It's a private joke.
Oh,
Indeed.
The fact that we pushed forward the tennis courts
oh,
last summer,
well, we had to, though.
I know we did,
Had to.
but
Because we were so certain that Measure L was going to pass, we started spending the money before it passed, right?
No,
I heard that more than once.
had to keep the project alive.
had to keep the
Indeed.
project alive for
Yeah.
DSA,
Yes.
yeah.
Item B, maximum occupancy chart.
So it's been so long since I had visited this, and we had, it's on page 19 of 21, it's of the handbook 21. We had an organization that pointed out that our occupancy was a lot less in here than it was displayed up on the wall. and I don't know if you remember when Lori Robertson used to sit on, she made the statement that we had put lower amounts to keep the capacity from being too large from the organizations, and I could not remember that. So I was just kind of bringing it back as a discussion. Maybe it just needs a column that says, because I mean, it's clearly stated on the wall what the occupancy is.
The fact that the fire marshal says
let-
our maximum occupancy is X, I feel no obligation whatsoever to say that an organization can have that many people in a facility.
Right.
That's the max per the fire marshal.
So I think we could just put in a column. This is just kind of a sample, but keep, I don't know if the rates seem reasonable to you. They seemed really off on Bethany's multipurpose room when I looked at those. And I think Mr. Nolan had worked on these initial numbers when we placed these in the handbook, because I know I didn't. But Rita and Aria had visited the sites to at least get the maximum occupancy, just because it was pointed out, but not necessarily what we're obligated to allow in there.
So what, so the scratched out numbers are what?
The numbers that were originally in the handbook.
125?
No,
Exactly what I said, just because it says that. doesn't mean put it in-
Sure, you can have the multipurpose room. You can have 8 people in there.
Anyway, we may need to revisit the numbers that we had, but I agree with trustee Clements, that we're under no obligation to allow what the fire marshal says as our maximum occupancy as far as outside agencies using the facilities.
So
Maybe we decide on a percentage, maybe,
that's a good idea.
What is,
whatever it is,
what does everybody
50%.
think about 50% of the fire marshal's numbers?
I'm just throwing it out there, a percentage, some kind of
We can
percentage.
take a look at it, because do we have the fire marshal numbers? Is that what these are?
Actually, the next page, they went to each of the school sites,
Oh,
and they took an image of what each one had.
976.
So that is what the second
Yes.
set of numbers is.
So, and the only reason why we came to revisit this is because we were questioned it.
Well, and the 125 at Bethany, that's
Yeah,
some of
that's
those
what I
are,
said, whoa.
some of those are fair questions, actually.
So, let's start with
if we,
Altamont, yeah.
well, if we use a number that's a certain percentage of what the fire marshal allows, and we put that in our handbook, are we gonna be policing that? And if we are not
Had
gonna
a couple
police
of
it,
drop-ins
then,
on
Well,
situations.
typically, we ask, and I believe, in the facilities, how many people are you expecting at this event? So if they say, if the number at Altamont is 438, and somebody says, well, we're having an event of 600 people, we can say, well,
Sorry.
you can't.
okay,
Yeah, we did
As
that.
far as standing at the door counting heads walking
Right,
in.
right.
That's probably not gonna happen.
Right.
But if
Right.
there's ever a complaint or an issue that a group is having more people in there than the handbook states, then
We
And
had
that's,
that issue
that's
happen
happened a
at the high
couple
school.
times.
Do you remember when we had that happen at the high school, and I actually was flat against including in the handbook overnight stay? I'm like, no, exception only. When it comes up, bring it forward.
Overnight stay,
Remember at the
what?
high school,
Yeah,
they
they
stayed
had-
overnight, they had
Oh, where
2
they
or 3
wanted to
nights.
stay in the facilities?
Stayed in the facilities
Yeah, we
overnight,
tried
and they
that,
came to the
didn't
board.
work.
Yes, I know.
Didn't work.
So I was very happy with this idea that I
One
did not
school
want to
ruined it
include
for everyone, which you knew it would happen. I knew that maybe the first school did okay, but second school, third school, whatever, it was gonna go away quickly.
Yes.
So what was your percentage recommendation?
I thought 50% of what the fire marshal says is maximum capacity.
I'm okay with that, and the reason why I like it is we should be able to, we should make it so that the facility administration, the school administration can visually tell that they're below the fire marshal number. If we allow too close, like if you knock off 30 people, you're not gonna be able to look in the multipurpose
Right.
room and tell, so you will be counting, because we absolutely, positively, 100% cannot exceed that.
I'm not sure if anyone has this answer. Bernie probably would, but she's not here. Do you know how many kids we feed at a given time in any of the multi-use rooms, just to get an idea for these dining numbers, what,
You mean the kids that come?
Well, they
I'm
go
sorry.
through, they rotate 2 or 3
rotate.
lunch periods at a time.
So it's,
Trying to,
I bet Bernie knows
far as
pretty much
cold
exactly how
ask,
many
'cause she could
students
say how
are
many,
in
because
each
we're
school.
probably
Because-
feeding,
100, 250.
are you talking about hot lunch? How many
I
come
know,
out?
right?
Are you talking about the
Anyway,
ones that actually
I've-
come through?
when
It's
I
about
visit-
400 a day.
3, 4 lunch periods.
So 400 in a day, but that's
But that's
purchasing
just the
hot
ones
lunch.
that are hot.
And they're usually broken up
So-
into 3 lunch, 2 to 3 lunch periods.
We have K through
Yeah,
2,
but
3
those kids
through
are bringing
5, and
lunch
then
too.
6 through
They're
8.
sitting
That's
there
what I was
eating.
telling you, yeah.
Yeah.
but when I visit,
Depending on the school.
when I go to visit the schools, I always eat in the cafeteria because I feel like it's part of my job to be quality control and the food's good, so that works
is
out.
good.
But
I agree.
they're always crowded. The lunchrooms are always crowded. So if we had an idea of how many kids that is, we should put a number lower than, somewhat lower than that for outside groups to have dining in there because it's just, it's too crowded.
Well, and these are this for children
Right.
versus adults.
Right.
Right.
So I just kind of took an 800 population school and divided it into 3 for 3 different lunch periods, it's 266.
So
So looking at these numbers, you've got 358, 359.
I would propose that you, with this guidance, right, come back to us with specific recommendations, like 50% of fire marshal would be the number of people, and then for food, bring a recommendation, but tell us, find out, how many students are served and say it's this many, so that we can, we have that as a frame of reference, the committee for
Okay.
determining a recommendation to the board for the max
Okay.
dining.
Maybe we could also go up how many tables they actually have in the
a good idea.
multi-use
True.
dine.
If whichever is lower, because obviously you can't have more people dining when we
True.
have tables. So I guess the
Well,
number
you
is
know,
whichever is lower.
And adults take up more space at a table than a
That's
child
the same,
would,
yeah.
so adjusting down for that.
They have the dining on these.
Cool.
All right,
Action items.
didn't have any. Let's see.
All right, moving on now to item 7, action items.
We didn't take
And we
any
can-
formal action.
We can dispense with that. Item 8, future agenda topics and a meeting date. Recommended future topic is high school theater.
And I know that we discussed at the last meeting that we would likely not allow it to be placed on civic permits, that we would encourage them to do an exceptions only after we have had an opportunity to make sure we understand the equipment and that it will be available for that. So for now, it's kind of going to continue as a
Yeah,
future agenda.
I think we can continue to discuss how it will look in the event that we allow an exception, but I don't see any need not to leave it as a case-by-case, exception-based thing for the foreseeable future.
I think I'm probably, and maybe I didn't state it correctly. I think I'm 180-degree opposite of you, or maybe 90. I don't know. That we should say that it is available on a case-by-case instead of saying no. Because if you
Exactly.
say no, all the public will hear is no.
No, and I do agree with that.
And I
Maybe I
didn't,
worded that not, because I wanted to say, it is available, once we're comfortable with it, come to us on a case-by-case scenario.
and we can frankly open it up as being available on a case-by-case basis, and then when we decide we're comfortable with allowing outside, then we can start to consider the case-by-case requests.
Yeah, I mean, I think that organizations should, if they want to apply for use the day after we get our certificate of occupancy, they're more than welcome to apply for use. Most likely, the committee is going to recommend a no,
Or
because it's like we still haven't gotten our arms around it, right?
Exactly.
But if we say, but I don't want, I want the perception to be, or I want our message to be, look, it's available on a case-by-case basis, and the first, it's going to take some time after we get it finished for us to get our arms around it. B, certain organizations will make more sense. I mean, if the Sacramento Soccer Society wants to hold a play, I'm not going to be real positive about that, like, really, you're not, like, but, like I said, the Shakespeare in the Park, they've been doing it. They're dedicated to their craft. I know a lot of the students that and adults that are involved in that. And, so I want it to be a positive, but also say, look, we've got to get our arms around it as well.
And to think, I was thinking more about early summer, revisiting it, and maybe including something in the handbook that says, for this facility, contact, Rita Sounds, or however we
Well,
want to approach that. And obviously develop rates at that point,
Are you talking about early this coming summer?
maybe.
Because the facility won't, as I
December,
understand it, it
correct?
won't be ready until December, and so I don't know that we really need to put it in the handbook until it's at least completed and
That makes it
that
better
sort
for
of thing,
us.
so.
Maybe we'll remove it.
Yeah, but if somebody calls and asks,
I think we can start working on draft stuff.
Oh,
but-
yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, have it, make sure it's ready for when the facility opens up. But, yeah, the people that are using the theater are gonna need to learn the lights and the sound
yes.
and all
And
the other
We've usually
equipment.
allowed a year, but I don't know that we would need to in
Yeah, like with the
this
kitchen.
case.
I think it kind of depends on how quickly our
Staff are able to
Staff.
implement.
become comfortable with it.
I agree.
Ms. Boulay missed the last, or wasn't on the committee at the last meeting. But I started to say miss, but you didn't miss it because you weren't supposed to be here. But we discussed the fact, well, it's not a fact, the idea that most likely all of the equipment will have to be run by either district staff or students who've been
Right.
trained
Right.
in running the equipment, not just open the doors like we do
Right.
at a multi-use room and let people go in there and
I
do what they
agree.
do.
And I think
So
that's a great opportunity for the kids who may be in the drama program to have volunteer hours to
Right.
work some of that equipment for other organizations that come in and may want to use the theater.
Makes me nervous.
Having
It's
students.
baby steps,
having
though. It's
students.
still
As
baby
long as they're
steps.
properly trained, yeah, it's fine.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, I'll tell you,
That's part of
the
being in
CTE
theater.
program, so if we, put it this way, if we cannot create a program that properly trains our high school students to operate that, to me, that would be a vote of no confidence in the CTE program. Like, if we say that we can teach you to weld, and we can teach you to do this, and we can teach you to do that, and we can teach you biomedical, we can do this, and we can do that, but I'm sorry, you can't use lights and sound.
We can teach you to do all these things, but we won't trust you to do with
let you
our
do
stuff.
Like, what do we
Right.
expect a university to say when, or a company to say when we forward our students that way?
Right, right.
Not to put too fine a point on it.
Is there anything else that anyone on the committee would like to add to a future agenda, or anything else that they'd like
I
to?
mean, besides salaries for committee, no.
I have a quick question.
Oh, that's right, thank you.
Alvina, real quick, sorry. Did you discuss with Mrs. Wingo at Bethany, Principal Wingo, the issue regarding the tables that are being used?
I cannot
For different
remember.
events.
I've been sick for 2 weeks.
I know, okay.
So
Just
Rita, remind me to check. I don't remember if I did or if I didn't. Because we
basically,
discussed it
there's,
at the last meeting.
basically there are organizations that are using the tables that are underneath the stage that BSF has purchased, and, they shouldn't be using those. They should be using the cafeteria tables. They should, so Mrs. Wingo, Principal Wingo was, a little concerned and wanted to know if we could possibly either lock that up or, just figure out what
I
to do
think we
about
wanted to
that.
also make sure that every time an organization uses our facilities, there's a check-in, check-out process to make sure that things are in the exact same order as they were when they were released. So we'll have to see if we can have Uriah check and
And-
see if there's some issues with, if we can identify who's been using those tables, I don't know, but.
And I would think that any of our tables, chairs, anything else that can be locked up should be locked up. And if a organization wants to use tables and chairs, they tell us how many tables and chairs they want to use, and we tell them which tables and chairs they may use, and that way the custodian on the checkoff can say, okay, yes, the tables were used, the legs aren't broken, they're back in,
Right,
put into
everything
place
is-
and that sort of thing, so that we don't run into these sorts of issues.
Okay. Another future topic that we will be bringing forward, Mr. Legrand, or who was it, Rita Sellens received a request for the summer use. So I spoke with Mr. Legrand today, and we thought maybe if he had an opportunity to work with the custodians at the sites throughout the month of March to decide what projects they had going on over the summer. I know last summer we just opened it up, but then we found some sites it was difficult to get in there and do some maintenance work. So we in the district office, once he has an opportunity to work with the custodian staff, determine what needs to be on lockdown for a week or two over the summer, and we'll place those items as civic permits before we allow anyone to put in any summer use requests.
In other
Kind of
words,
learned from that last year.
in other words, developing a maintenance calendar for the summer so that we know Wickland, we need 3 weeks.
Last year, we did it during spring break, and it sounds like we're going to have to do it next month if we want to, because we're thinking April 1st, opening up the summer,
Yeah.
for the summer.
So I could bring back forward. So in March, he'll determine the needs for the summer. We'll put in the dates, then we will open it up through the summer for outside organizations to then calendar events for summer use.
When you say facilities, are you including the ball fields and all that?
Everything.
Okay, because Mountain House Little League uses it into summer, and if they, so if they're in playoffs, so I'm assuming they've already reserved it into the summer.
Might have. But I'll check and see if it's through the summer. They did for the summer? Okay, so they've
So
already
the
done it.
blackout period is no new reservations until
It's mostly the
LeGrand's team.
interior buildings.
And I think that would have to be dependent on the need and the severity of the condition that needs to be remedied. If there's something that we have to address,
Well, yeah,
it's,
I mean, that's, if a pipe breaks, I'm sorry.
And that's written in our handbook once something like
Right.
that
And-
happens.
I'm a big proponent of allowing outside uses of our facilities as much as possible, but, and I know I sound like a broken record, it can't be at the expense of doing what we need to do, or our students, or making sure that facilities are kept up and repaired and so forth in a timely fashion. If we have to tell people no, even if they already have things booked, if there's something that we need to do,
Yep,
it has to come first.
I agree.
If we need to, yeah.
Exactly. And I don't think we should kick people out because we feel like,
That's when I want to do the repair, right?
Right,
If
but
that's
if-
when I need to do the repair, that's different than that's
Exactly.
when I want to do the repair.
exactly.
And then, of course, usually towards the end of the school year, we request the school sites to start entering their events through December of the following year, but we'll work with the summer first.
So April 1st, you're saying? The
We're,
calendar
our aiming for this interior for the summer would be April 1st, that's what we're aiming for.
for the multipurpose?
Yes, because they're,
By the way, we are 32 for the girls, for Mustangs right now, halftime.
32,
Oh,
32.
wow.
Thanks.
I know.
Any gym time for them. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm hoping that as soon as it opens up, that's why I'm sitting here, because Rena's like, you go. I'm like,
yes,
okay.
well, I'm glad he reminded me, we spoke about that today, that we needed to discuss
If,
that.
if you're in contact with anybody at the game, tell them to let the girls know they need to win tonight, because I couldn't make it tonight because of this meeting.
Yes.
And so they need a game,
Andy is there.
they need a game next
Oh,
week.
Andy went.
Yeah, he's posting the score.
Yeah, he's good
Okay,
at that. He's our Mountain House Sports Center.
They're trying, I mean, we're trying to, there are kids coming up in the, you've seen them play 7th, 8th, 5th, 6th. These kids are good.
Yes.
They train like
June 15th?
1.5 hours, 3 times a week.
And they've played together for years,
that's
from
right.
recess to,
I
they
should have
play
written this
so
stuff
well
down.
together.
So we were thinking, making the deadline for the school sites, for next fall, June 15th, for them to get their events in there for through the winter, through December.
That's good, because usually it's like July 31st or something. That would be
June
good.
15th through,
But we would have it for the summertime, they would do it before. We would
yes,
know.
yes.
Yeah.
April 1st for that summer, and then in the
'Cause I looked
fall,
around the gyms over here and there's nothing available, and there's one in Livermore, NB Courts, and they charge $65 an hour. Wow. And the kids are like, this is like, they pay $600 for the whole season.
and I do get concerned about the high school, because the high school is gonna probably be an additional 200 more students this next year, because the senior class graduating is smaller than the 8th grade class coming in. So we're gonna be impacted there
Yeah.
more sporting.
Yeah, I think
teams.
it's mostly because my daughter plays volleyball, mostly it's volleyball during the summer. And that's just conditioning going on for a few hours, and I think the rest, I don't know, band or someone will practice.
Okay.
and things like
Yes.
that. It should be some, couple of hours here or there.
Are we done?
Just the calendar event, does March 21st work for everybody?
Let's take,
Tuesday, March 21st.
sounds good to me.
I left my cell phone in the car again.
Because we have board meeting March 1st and March 15th, and then the following week, March 21st.
It's fine.
Sounds good. I can't think of anything. Unless there's a baseball game or something.
Okay. Phew. Any other additional items to add to the next meeting's agenda? No?
Can't think of anything offhand.